Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the State of the State. I'm Meaka Brown, and this is the Plant Lady podcast. Don't, why y'all laughing?
It's cute.
Today, we have a few of my favorite women in the room. We're going to talk about the state of the cannabis industry in Massachusetts. We're calling it the State of the State since we're in this big political maelstrom of a life right now. We're gonna talk about the state of cannabis. To my right, we have Miss Dwan Packnett, VP of Government Relations at AIR. Say hey to them, Dwan. Say
Hello,
hi.
everyone. It's great to be here.
To my left, we have Miss Drew Ledbetter of Zeb Boutique.
Hello, hello.
And to my far left, we now see I gotta go to my notes here for this one. This is the boss lady here. We have Miss Shakia Scott of the City of Boston. She is the Senior Cannabis Business Manager and the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion. Say hi to her, y'all. And we have a lovely studio audience today. I have been wanting to say that since I've been watching The Price is Right. But yes, I wanted to bring these folks together so we could have a candid conversation on where we were and how we got here and where we're trying to go. Um, and it's no mistake that I am in a room full of women. I feel like our position on things in this industry is often underlooked, overshadowed, or not even considered. But I know for a fact that myself and these ladies have done a lot of cleaning up in this industry in this state. So, who better to have a conversation about where we go from here? So, I'm going to start with Miss Dwan, who is also a really good friend of mine. I'm going to just put that out there so y'all know how this really going to go down. Um, Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you see the industry from your vantage point.
Okay. So I am, again, my name's Dwan Packnett. I worked for the city of Boston, actually. I came here in 2009. I'm from Georgia, and at that time, I went to Emory University. I was a lawyer there, and then I came here when the downturn in the economy. So I came here looking for things to do, and I went to the city of Boston, and I worked for the Boston Home Center. Excuse me. Worked for the Boston Home Center, and then the Office of, I guess it was Economic Development at the time with Marty Walsh. And at that time, cannabis was starting. And I lived in Brighton, and I had some friends who were interested into, why don't we, with this whole new thing starting, this is 2018, why don't we start a cannabis business? Only to 13th, 2019, but who's counting, that Marty Walsh issued an executive order that you had to leave the city of Boston if you were going to have an investment in a cannabis industry. So you couldn't work there. Of course, now sorry.
Can we get Dwan some water, please?
So what I did next was I was very lucky, incredibly lucky, that at the same time, Sierra Naturals Inc., one of the premier early cannabis companies, was in Cambridge, and they were having a bit of trouble with community relations because I think it became apparent as we started in cannabis that these are local businesses, the local community, especially in Boston, the local community is going to be involved. This is not something you're going to be able to come in and dictate that you're going to do in a neighborhood. And they needed, at that very time, they needed someone to work with them. And they created actually a job for me. So my title and all, it started out with public affairs, and then it was a promotion simply because two people had the same titles, kind of seriously. Seriously. But the important part was it is about community. It is about social justice and equity. That was why I was brought into to Sierra Naturals, and that is one of the things that's been good about the company that I work with, in that they did focus on that seriously in order to obtain a license. So that's how I went with AIR. I have now been there, I realize October 1st, it will be 5 years. which is like dog year. It is such a lot of time
40
for someone to
years.
be
Yeah.
at one, absolutely, to be at one
Yeah.
place
Mhm.
in one cannabis company. But I
Mhm.
think because they're changing, we're now affiliated with Air Wellness, which is an MSO, multi-state operator. And again, I think a lot of the values that we had, it's a little different when you're kind of spread out. We have a store in Boylston, which was a big focus of getting our license, and where you learned a lot about the community, working with the city, working just with agencies and with the community, and making sure that you were giving back as much as you could. So we worked with the Cultivate Ed program. We actually hired people out of the Cultivated program, and not just as bud tenders, but as one of my liaisons, Shay Rainey, I will say her name, actually works in Shay.
Hey, Shay.
Hey,
We love
Shay.
Shay.
We work together, but she works in the corporate side. So the idea is to make sure that the opportunities, both as part of Castle Leaf being the company I'm in, and working at Air, that these opportunities are available to people who have been left out of the industry, especially those folks who have been incarcerated or have, giving them an opportunity. Also working with people, hopefully, to get people in the legacy market. If we can improve the financing, I'll let these ladies talk about that. But once we do that, to get them into the cannabis business, that they should be a part of it. So I've been really lucky and blessed, and to meet folks like this and to be able to work with people like this. And it's been a kind of an exciting journey, if not a little bit nerve-wracking.
So where do you see what from your vantage point? Where's all the drama? What's causing the
She said,
drama?
"What drama?"
I think the
What's
drama,
causing the
most of the
drama?
drama is money. Most
Uh-huh.
of the drama
Uh-huh.
is that you can't go to a bank.
Yep.
Yep.
That's the drama. So if
Mhm.
you're going to be a small company, you have to have investors. How do you attract investors if you work for the city of Boston and Boston Home Center? I mean, where am I meeting investors?
Right.
Yes.
Those sorts of things. I think it's money. I think there is also work to be done on the stigma attached to cannabis. I know you do a lot of work with
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
on other things, that it's not as scary, but I think that's going to take time and work. But I think it's money. And I think it is also, as I'm looking at folks from the city, that it's also being very careful now that we're open, to not address, everyone was so focused on opening,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also to address
Staying
staying open.
open.
How do you grow this business? How do I get past the growing pains? What happens? What's available to me if it can't stay? And so you have more people sitting in that position.
Yes.
What happens when my investor wants out? What do I do?
Ooh.
Yeah, like
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
And so I think it's a good opportunity. I'm not going to say it's a bad time. I think it's an opportunity to realize where our focus needs to be now. We have enough, we're open. Now what? And then what happens with price compression, those sorts of things, descheduling would help, all of this. But I think for the city of Boston, I think in the state,
Mhm.
is recognizing we have folks open. Some of us are hanging on by a thread.
Yes,
Mhm.
ma'am.
And how do we get resources to folks so we can stay open? That to me is
So you just talked about all of it, but and people say to me all the time, okay, can we just stop talking about the money part? Like, that's
well,
not
okay.
us, that's the feds. And I'm like, no, wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it amongst our community. We get in these rooms together. This is why we live today, because we want people to hear outside of this room what the issue is. And it's always going to be money,
Mm-hmm.
because we cannot go to a bank. I mean, I did cannabis banking for a while, and I could tell you, like, it doesn't matter how great you look on paper,
Right.
you're still a ginormous risk.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how do we get around that, and how do we change it? And one of the things is we make so that people are more apt to fight for cannabis at the federal level. I mean, it's coincidental that this is election year, election
Mm-hmm.
season, and we're just in this big, as I said before, maelstrom of shenanigans, that people are distracted. No, they're distracted from real issues. Like, none of us were prepared for what if Kamala was sitting in the seat, and what's her position on cannabis. And we really can't get her to have a position on anything. I love you, Kamala, but I'm just saying. We can't get you to have a position on anything. So now all of our agendas are going to shift. all of our agendas should be shifting because we were prepared for Biden shenanigans. So what's the story going to be now with the Kamala presidency, right? Because this is at the end of the day, it's all political.
Mhm.
It's you know it's money, and it's always going to be money until we get this federal scheduling fixed, and banks can no longer charge fees or treat you like second class citizens, which I'm sure my friend here could tell everybody all about. We won't get into no name calling, or should we?
No, we
Okay,
won't.
You
because
can just get a loan.
We will not.
no, because they might close your account. You know what I mean? No, I'm serious. It's happened to BCW. It's happened to all of us. We all operate, and I think we forget that we operate at the pleasure of the DEA.
Mhm.
No, we don't really talk about that part.
Mhm.
Those three letters are only heard at congressional sessions
Mhm.
in DC. Well, guess what? I get to DC every now and then.
Yes, ma'am.
And those are the three people the three letters that I hear all the time is DEA. But yet here we don't talk about that. We act like, this is all straight and narrow and everything is gravy. It's not Gucci yet, y'all. Not until we're not operating at the pleasure of the DEA. So, Miss True,
Hey.
this lady has a story, y'all. I don't even think we have enough time to do the whole whole thing. We're gonna get a little condensed. But she has a story, and I wanted her here because her story is the example of how hard you have to work to open not just a dispensary, but a dispensary in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in Boston, in Mattapan.
I'm out of pan.
In Mattapan.
Yeah.
Go ahead, baby.
How you doing?
Tell them all about it.
Tell them all about it. My name is Judith Ledbetter. I am co-founder of Zeb Boutique, first Latina-owned dispensary in the city of Boston, which I think is interesting. And I want to acknowledge Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, y'all.
Ooh.
We outside. And also, yeah, the story's been long. This process is challenging. I would say one, because the systems that were in place, they didn't have our voice when they
Mhm.
created these systems.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of systems that were created, one, by people who stigmatized the plant. Two, they were afraid of the plant. And three, had no idea how to run a plant-based business or a regulated business. So they left a lot of people that should have been at the table having the conversation off the table and created these pockets of systems to try to empower us, right? And because you don't connect these systems, then we have drop-offs like getting a question on the ballot to legalize the plant, attaching the story of social justice to it, and attaching that the remediation is a fund, and the fund doesn't get created for 5 years.
Correct.
So you create all the other systems to put people into a funnel. So you create the program,
Yep.
you create the tag on this person that
Mhm.
now wraps their business around this tag,
Mhm.
and the tag promised you a dollar amount so that you can move your business
Mhm.
forward,
Mhm.
because that tag is a limitation when you're trying to scale, when you're trying to fundraise, when you're trying to grow. Having that social equity business tag limits you because of all the ownership standards, because we can't seem to manage our own businesses on our own. I'll digress. But with that being said, when you create 400 people that go into a program and there is less than 10 of them that have a business,
Yes.
Exactly.
I think we need to look at the program success rate and look at the systems that are feeding in and out of this program and scratch the board and start over with sensible policy, sensible systems, and really looking at what does it take for someone to succeed, and what does remediation or paying back the disproportionately impacted communities actually look like. It does not always look like giving me a social equity program tag and a couple of dollars. It often looks like creating opportunities for Black home ownership in our communities, or making sure that we own commercial properties, or making sure that you're investing in other types of businesses in our communities. we don't have to use cannabis dollars for just cannabis. Like, there's a lot of things that we need help with. There's a bunch of homeowners in the city that could do with new steps, a new porch,
Yep.
something.
Yep.
That is sometimes what it looks like.
That's
And
what
I
it
think
looks
that
like.
we get lost in all these systems and tags and names. But it really is, we create a social equity, economic empowerment tag. Then you have these business owners that are very limited in what they can do with their business. And then you don't give them the support financially to actually move things along. So you're crippling them again.
Mm-hmm.
This is just another way to put us behind on an industry that's just taking off. Everyone's like, oh, the cannabis industry, you got to get in now. Cannabis is not going anywhere.
Never.
Okay. The liquor industry still dropping new vodkas and tequilas
Yep.
and all that every week.
Yep.
Everybody's dropping a new brand. I've seen 3 t-shirt drops this week from people I know. There's always room to create. This is not going anywhere. So why don't we just slow down and create systems that actually create the success you want to see?
So let me just kind of play devil's advocate here with you.
Go ahead, baby.
You say there's plenty of space, but 16, 17 dispensaries, cannabis businesses have closed or lost their license.
Mhm.
And the lost your license, I think, is only like 1 or 2. But we are seeing rapid market consolidation. And as Dwan said earlier, folks are holding on by, I get emails, being on the Social Equity Advisory Fund Board. I see emails and people are in dire spaces. We did rush through 400 folks through a program. And on the other side, there was no money for them. There was a promise of money. And it took a while for a state to put that together. And we're still, we were able to get a stopgap and get about $2 to $3 million out to folks in the amounts of about 50K. And I think in the end it was about 40 businesses that were able to apply. But like, that's a drop in the bucket when you have so many people going through this program. And it's almost like it reminds me of post-slavery. It reminds me of just before Jim Crow, where we were all getting 40 acres and a mule, and we're all still waiting. So it's the same system. Only a handful of people were able to get in, get through the process, and everyone else is just left hanging. And then you have all this market consolidation on top of it. It's like the wild, like literally wild west. And I know we hear that all the time, but that's what it feels like. It feels like a modern day Jim Crow system.
Yeah, let me challenge you, because it is a wild west for the people who are in the wild west. I don't live in that frequency at all.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what I see is the people who are thriving and the people who are pushing through, the Nikki Johns and the Heritage Club, who hustler, first Black woman owned a dispensary in the city.
Yes.
What I see is the people who are being creative about their business opportunities and their plans. I see Blossom Flower, who really thought delivery was going to be it and realizes that price compression in Holyoke is bad.
Ooh.
And you know what? But she's doing transport and other things and really diversifying her licenses.
Correct.
There's a lot of success stories out of the program if you really focus on them. But imagine if those success stories had funding. That's usually
Ooh.
so. If they had resources, I always say, and I love the city of Boston because it's filled with resources for small businesses. I have seen so many of my friends open successful businesses in the city. I saw the space grants being offered, and I imagined, had the 2 years I've been waiting to get this license, had I had a space grant to hold the property. But I don't even get access because I'm not a small business owner in the city.
No.
So like, had we had these resources, can you imagine where Zeb Boutique would be? And they have resources upon resources, and then you show up to the meetings and there's no one that can speak to your agency. So it really, one of the things, I went to the Dinner Groups conference this week. Shout out to y'all too. And there was data presented about, it's not the amount of minorities or women or LGBT that are getting in. It's their amount they're moving up the ladder,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
In cannabis, we're not even getting in.
mhm.
So we cannot move up the ladder. So having a system where you funnel bud tenders, you train bud tenders, you don't have a formal bud training, like the state could have leveraged stuff like that.
Yep.
Why aren't we creating the infrastructure to educate the people we want to run these businesses and focus on that? Yeah,
Mhm.
people are struggling. This is the nature of the industry. Some people are going to win, a lot of people are not.
Mhm.
But the ones that are winning are leaving clues,
Mhm.
and other systems that are in place have left clues. So let's lean on those, right?
Yes.
If I can add, I think also what it costs to get in. When you talk about just having to pay the fees to the
Mhm.
CCC,
Mhm.
just your renewal fees, your licensing fees, and if you're, just coming in, and they have to be renewed each year, and then to the city of Boston. This is, city of Boston got rid of impact fees. Yay, thanks. Right?
City of
Okay.
Boston
Thank you,
and
City
Northampton.
of Boston
Yeah.
is really good, and I can't wait till we get to hear more about it.
Yeah.
But I think that that's one of the things people don't realize. It's that just what it takes to open your door. That
Yeah.
to have all of the things required, and to have the CCC. Hopefully, we will have someone running it soon. But to have the CCC take a look at, do I really have to be badged in every store? And I've paid, do I really have to, like some of the fees we're paying, do they really have to be done that way?
Mhm.
And that is cost prohibitive. If you're doing that and if I have to pay a fine
Mhm.
because I made a mistake, or those sorts of things, to really begin to look at this in a way that those are the kinds of things that kick up the price. This is before I even get in. To open my door, I have to pay all of this stuff, and
Yep.
it's just cyclical.
Yeah,
So-
but if you start paying fines, you create a punitive system.
Correct.
So
No.
we're not learning anything
Well, the
from
fact
each
that they
other.
will, and this is what I'm saying, the fact that I have to worry
Correct.
Right.
about if someone
Yeah.
does a spot inspection and comes in, I have to worry about I may end up with a
Not
fine.
just that, but training. As someone who has opened a few dispensaries, worked as a consultant, go in and help people get their inventory correct. People, and I'm not going to say everybody, because there's a lot of cowboys out there that just don't care, and I've worked for them too. Um, no puns intended. People are afraid of this. They're like, oh my God, I can't find the pre-roll. And we've looked everywhere, and it is something as simple as
It's punitive.
a bud tender thought they gave the customer the first one they asked for, and the bud tender actually gave them the second one they asked for.
Yeah.
It's a simple, there's no like intention there. It's a simple, what we call a fat finger mistake, right?
Mhm.
It happens when you go to the corner store. It happens when you go to Macy's. You get home and you have the medium instead of the large. You got to go. Well, guess what? The customer can't come back and exchange and get that corrected, and you have to report. And so many people are just like, I don't want to report. I'm already broke. I'm gonna have to pay a fine. And then I come and I go, no, you're not gonna pay a fine. You
Right.
just want to report it because that's what the rules say you have to do. No one's gonna hang you. But people are afraid. They're 100. I mean,
You made a great point, but it's because I hadn't thought of it until we had this
punitive.
conversation. It's punitive.
It's
I never
punitive.
thought of that
The
before.
system
I
is
come from healthcare, and if we really made everything a big deal and tied a punishment to people
Every time.
reporting, people would die.
yes.
So like, that's
'Cause I
what
won't do
frustrates me about
anything.
cannabis,
Yes.
because in cannabis, the lack of transparency is wild.
Mhm.
And it's because people, it's a punitive system. I keep
Yes.
trying to dig, and I'm like, what is it about this industry that's so different than healthcare? Healthcare is we have like 18 agencies regulating every hospital.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And it's like, so it does not require 18 agencies for us to have transparency.
Mhm.
We should be able to have these conversations and really think about what have we learned in the last 5 years. The
Correct.
CCC can't even dig into that because they're in complete chaos. Like,
To the
they
extent they
can't even
exist.
do the work that
Well,
they need.
just for the record, we did invite the state here, and there was a last minute scheduling conflict. So I just want to put that out there. But go ahead, tell them how you feel, girl.
I think I could jump in here now. My name is Shakia Scott. I am currently the Senior Cannabis Business Manager for the City of Boston. But previously, I was the first director of equity and community outreach for the state of Massachusetts at the Cannabis Control Commission. I'm actually the first person in the nation to stand up a social equity program in the cannabis industry in the nation. We have the person who followed in those footsteps, Celia Williams, here as well. And so a lot of the things that we've touched on between you three are, one, valid, but I also think that they are common misconceptions of what's happening regulatorily and between the public, right? And we get that a lot, right? We see what it's like being an advocate and then coming into the system and then being like, oh, this is what shit looks like from the inside, right? But from the outside, people have a completely different perspective.
Completely different perspective.
The first day I got to the CCC, people were at our public meeting like, where's the program? I'm like, I got here yesterday. I don't even know what people want yet, right? Because like we said, and like Drew pointed out, we need to be talking to the people who the program is for, right? The program wasn't for me.
Correct.
It wasn't for me to go around and say, I created this program, right? It was to make sure that we're standing it up properly for the people that it is for, which were, and by the way, Massachusetts is also the first state to have equity language in our regulations, in our law, in our commission's mission. And so it's not to say they've done everything right, right? But it's also to put us on the map to say, we had the right intentions, right? But the right intentions don't always mean
Good
the right
intentions.
practice or good intentions or
Pay
the right outcome, right?
right to the devil.
And the financial part of it is that Massachusetts didn't put the fund first. They didn't put the money first. And so when other jurisdictions come on to legalize, that's what they need to keep in mind. The money needs to come first. It needs to be startup funding. And I like to think of reparations, and that's a different conversation than
Very
tax
different.
reinvestment.
Very
We
different.
should not be waiting for tax reinvestment off of businesses that we were already penalized for being in, right? Because this industry exists already. Right now, we're capitalizing it and turning it into consumer capitalism, right? But the industry already exists and people were penalized for running this industry. And now we're saying, okay, well, we're just going to take money that you raise off of your valid business and then reinvest it back into you. So I'm reinvesting back into myself and not actually receiving a reparation
Correct.
or a real investment back into the damage that was done to my community and my people.
You touch on something that I have just been thinking about forever. Where's all that money from 28, what is it, 2019? 2019 until now, but you know.
2018.
2018, right? 2018.
November
November 2018.
Sarah was the first.
I was gonna say, are you counting the exclusive medical time, which would take you back to like 2013, 14?
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just want to say that.
That part too. Where's all that money? But the taxpayers, the consumers, are funding the reparation.
Correct.
So the same people that was harmed is paying. All you doing is just taking our money and just no, baby. I want you to pay the money.
Exactly.
Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Yes, we were the first to put it in our regulations, and that. As someone who has to read them all the time, and who, I mean, in my former position, I had to be aware of every state's regs and check them consistently to see if there were any changes. So I read a lot of regs and I get to see who's doing what. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if that's going to work, but I'm going to watch this state. Like Michigan and New York is hellfire on wheels. Okay?
Yep.
Woo! Woo! They're just absolutely, I applaud the people who have to work in that system because it's just, that's incredible. No one really put logical intent on the transition for New York. There was a fundamental lack of New York standing inside of the drug world to
Mhm.
understand you were not going to just tell people to close their doors, stop selling weed, get in line, get in line and
Not get
wait
in
for your
line.
certification. No, I had to say it like that because that's how they. Oh no, they were going to send cease and desist. I get invited to some really interesting places, and I just like to listen to people. And I listen to New York regulators say, "Oh no, they've all been served with cease and desist, and then they can go and apply. And then if they receive a license," I said, "So you want these people who have probably generationally been selling cannabis for
Yep.
years? All they know, that's how they feed their children, that's how they pay their bills, to stop
Yep.
and get online for some government cheese cannabis,
Same thing in
right?"
California.
My
Right?
gosh.
And let MSOs and all those people come and with their money and do what they're gonna do. Hell no, that was not gonna happen. First of all, New Yorkers wasn't going for that because I mean, all them people without their weed, no. No, if y'all think New York is crazy now, get on the queue or at 7 o'clock on Sunday with some folks that ain't high and see what's gonna happen to you.
But I think one of the things that happens in Massachusetts, I think it is also the barriers to entry.
Oh, for
Because
sure.
if you
Mhm.
have any kind of criminal record or, Corey, that you are not allowed to, for a while, you weren't allowed to, technically, you weren't allowed to work in the cannabis industry.
Correct.
And actually, I worked with Will Brownsberger to
Mm-hmm.
make sure. Now, whether the company will still hire you is another thing, but it's not that you could not work if you had a Corey or a record
Mm-hmm.
in the cannabis industry, though this was supposed to be what we did to
Correct.
help people
It,
in
Correct.
certain communities.
It is to a certain degree.
Degree.
So the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission does outline specific infractions, certain felonies, and timelines in which you can participate in different licensing factions. So it does vary, but they were intentional about laying that out in the beginning. We in Star Wars.
I have no idea what's
There's
happening.
definitely some Star Wars happening.
Wow.
I was
That's
like, the background
incredible.
music's perfect timing.
Right?
She's getting good on this one. I was like, go ahead, girl, get with it.
It is a
did-
full moon today, so
It
anything is
sure is.
possible.
I did want to touch on the programming aspect of it, but also as we're talking about it, identify the separation in the dual licensure process that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Not every state has a dual licensure process, but Massachusetts is one of them. And what that means is that not only do you go through the CCC's licensing process, but each city and town can also, they don't have to, but they can also upstand their own licensing process. An application, which comes into play in those dual fees.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying both the city and the state. Our tax is at 20%, 17, which the state gets, 3 of which the city gets, and then cities can then add on an additional 3% tax. So then you're at 23% taxes on your cannabis business. I think that also feeds into programming that we are talking about. And I think what Massachusetts did, which is also a misconception, is that we don't have a licensing program. We have licensing, and then we have at the state level the equity program. And that is just a technical assistance program. So all of it is education. It has 4 tracks. It may have more now. From when I was there, I started early 2018 when the commission was first beginning, and I was there for about 2.5 years. And it has 4 tracks that are focused on entrepreneurship, workforce development at both the entry level and core level, and then an ancillary track, which I think we should get into talking about as well. But it's all education and beneficial in terms of lessening those licensing fees, doing away with application fees, reducing your annual renewal fees. And we're trying to implement those at the city level too. But I think it becomes this broader thing, and I love to say this, is that 1, equity is not a program. And so we're never going to undo any of the injustices. Oh, look at the theme music.
I say every time you get hot, girl, the music come on.
We're never going to undo any of the injustices or the damage done to these specific communities, Black specifically, because they are the most impacted. That has been done with a program. And so we have to really look at the overall comprehensive idea of equity having its tendrils in everything that it touches, whether that's licensing, separate beneficial programs, funding, right? And then when we get to funding, we do have to talk about the feds. And I think people don't name the DEA because they're just like, that's the feds, right? That's the feds. Anytime we're saying the feds, we're talking about the DEA, even though we're not saying DEA.
Correct.
And there's a lot of those, even those city programs that can't fund it because they're all federally funded.
Yes.
And banking, aside from just the risk factor, they also have their own long history of racial discrimination and bias against banking in general. So we can always be like, oh, federal rescheduling, which will not change anything. Under federal rescheduling, cannabis will still be illegal, overseen by the DEA and the FDA. Banking will not be for the people that it's meant to be for. It will mostly empower banks and corporations that still will be discriminatory in their practices against specific communities, because that's a long history that just redlining and slavery that we can't really, we're never going to undo through the CCC, through the city of Boston. We have to be one, yes, we need to focus on federal descheduling. But we need to be really intentional about how do we start undoing those tendrils, right? Because we can say all day, oh, it's federally legal now.
No, it's not.
And then what, right? We're still going to have those outcomes where it's going to be hard still for these same communities to find investors, bank. They might have higher fees to bank. My mouth is getting dry.
I was going to say, just think about like even home ownership. We've seen this example recently where you get the couple that had their home appraised lower. Like in every system, there is an implicit bias.
Exactly.
So you have to break the system. And just do something different.
So, okay, go ahead.
Well, I have a couple of ideas.
Listen.
I think, in getting back to when we were talking about how people work and badging and that sort of thing, you have to pay for every badge. You have to do a lot of things before someone get badged. When I talk about that background check, when I talk about the idea you have a query, why is that decision made by the CCC? Why isn't that made on that level of who I'm going to have as a bud tender? It's not like I'm asking them to run the business. They're going to be a bud tender. Why aren't I doing that when I hire? And why does the CCC, why am I paying for the CCC and taking time for them to come back to tell me, yes, you can work for her, to be honest. So that's one way to begin to look at it. And to leave the CCC where I'd like to see them put their attention. Who are behind the LLCs that have less than 10% of the business? Who are those people and how many do they have?
That right
again,
there.
How many do they have? Do they have because if I'm up to 9.9, no one's asking. And how many of those do you have someone who arguably is going to have a veto, which is supposed to be under the CCC's rules, what gives you control of the business if I cannot let you do something? So that, to me, is where the CCC should be putting their attention, especially now that we're in this beginning to transfer. We have a business. I'm going to get new investors. How do you know that someone who is at 10% or lower, because everyone else in Boston's the best at it, with your statements that you fill out, your interest statements, you really are, that you know everyone, and to make sure you don't have employees, you give everyone, even if it's less than 10%, I want to know everybody who's on this license. But you're probably the only one who asks to know. Boston's probably the only place I've been familiar with.
The CCC does. They do ask to know, and it I believe at the end of around 2020, it took a while to get into practice, but they started really investigating everyone on a license one to make sure that people were not going over the license limits, but realistically to make sure that people weren't backdooring equity. Because there's a lot of predatory, be the black face of my business, and not for nothing, a lot of us are willing to.
Well, let me say this. Hold on now. I mean, for some folks, and I know a few of them, you know, someone comes up to you and offers you more money than you've ever seen and you're probably ever going to see. All you have to do is sell cannabis.
Yep.
Because let's not, oh my God, you know, this is the best thing in the world for everybody. Not everybody can function in this space. I've had bud tenders that were just like, it's just been my goal to sell weed for real my entire life. And I'm like, baby, no, that ain't it. Number one, that's not it. That should not be your goal in life, is just to sell weed. There's way more into it than that. And there's this idea that this is fun.
Oh yeah.
I've actually heard from a few folks who have been advocating in this industry for a really long time that they're ready to go because it's not fun anymore, because they thought this was going to be fun. This is not about fun. There's a whole lot that goes into standing up a compliant business. And when I say compliant, that's guns, tobacco, and liquor. Okay? Those things, and medical. Those are the places where there is vast oversight at every single level. And that's not for everybody. Everybody can't step into that space and have that as a career, because as we said earlier, it's punitive. Okay. And everybody can't handle that. Everyone doesn't know how to just not be afraid. Okay. We're already talking about a core community of people who naturally live in fear, because we've been living in America in fear for 500 years. Okay. So that's a topic for another podcast.
Can I add a nuance, though?
But that piece is important.
No, but there's a nuance, right? There's nuance to everything. I'm a very nuanced person. But there are people who are the black face of an organization, and that's their only way in. I'm not against a good deal being made if especially like in New York was a perfect example. There were a lot of card applicants that are like, yo, listen, I'm already doing something else, but since I got locked up, I'll take a couple dollars. And they didn't mind doing that at all. They had no interest in pursuing that. And then you have I'm going to be the black advocacy face of a business that will do harm to other black and minority businesses.
Correct.
And that's a very different type of player that you're plugging in.
Absolutely.
If you're plugging and playing somebody who just, I qualify for this license, I have the access to it, I'll be a black face because I'll get a couple dollars and moves my family into a different dimension.
Correct.
I can never be upset at somebody figuring out how to feed their family.
Absolutely.
And I agree.
Not.
But when you start stepping into these roles and letting those hands, I was going to say the other word, those hands come up your back, and then you start tap dancing for them, that's when I have a problem, because then you're doing harm to our community.
Correct.
And you're not really just getting your bag and moving right along.
Exactly.
You're actually participating and helping them further oppress us. And that's the nuance that's happening in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Can I add a bit more nuance?
Please do. I love it.
Both. I think that when you're getting an application, one of the things I do is the license applications. So when you have a list of things from the city of Boston, and you have one from the CCC, and they feed each other. You're going to the city of Boston first. They have a list of things, a detailed list of things you have to meet.
Yes, we do.
If I know a person of color, then that's going to be one of the things that help. You have to have diversity. I'm with you. If I'm coming in and I'm putting my list together and I'm going to say, I need women, I need diversity at this point, I need someone who has lived in the city, in this community, and those things are important. But I see it as that fulfills an application. I did not, and Castle Leaf is not. It's not equity.
No,
So
but
my
same
business.
here.
But
Same
that's
here.
and that's what I'm saying
Yeah.
exactly. And so you and I are going. So what I'm going to do, I don't care what you are. If you feel you could be someone white, what do you bring to that license? I can
Right.
check off this box. So when I go, I am being honest to my regulators at the city. I'm being honest to my regulators at the CCC. No, this is real. That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
Whatever your role is that you came in
Right.
and said you were going to do,
Correct.
I'm expecting you to do that. So if your role is to be the licensed person, so when the CCC comes in or whatever, you're going to be around, that's your role. And so I agree with you that that should be something that is equally as important as the person who is putting cash in,
Absolutely.
because you cannot put this business together without each of these skills. You can have all the money on earth and cannot run a cannabis store efficiently.
I want to add something here, Meaka, especially about where we're going.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
And what I want to add to this conversation about the backdoor of equity, right, is that in 5 and 10 years, and this also relates to license transferability, because right now in the city, we are having a major conversation. I'm going to say this out loud. It hasn't gone out. So special announcement. We are about to open up our ordinance to be amended in terms of license transferability. So people looking to sell their licenses or transfer their licenses, and we want to know from you what that looks like. Business owners, right? Because like you said, when I'm standing up a program, I don't own a cannabis business. I'm not interested. So how can I develop a program for a business owner? How can I tell you how to transfer or when you can transfer your license? And I don't own a license. And so just opening that up there. But how do we as a city in a state, right, 5 to 10 years down the line, track equity? What is equity to us? What is the success, right? And I know that even in this conversation, we have limited equity to licensure. And while that may be owning the business and opening the business and where that goes, that's still part of licensure, right? We have to expand our idea of what equity is in this industry beyond just the business itself. One, there are consumers. There is medical cannabis that people need equity in. There is ancillary businesses that, so how do we as a city, right? If people are able to just put their name on a license and be like, yep, this is an equity business, or sell their business, 10 years down the line, somebody says, oh, well, then what did Boston do for equity? Or what did the state of Massachusetts do for equity? And we're like, actually, there's no more equity licenses. We don't have equity licenses. We have equity statuses. There's no more equity businesses because everybody sold their license.
No, and I that's a great, like, if you think about path forward as a business owner, I also think, like, if I wanted to exit out of Boston, what would that look like?
Right.
And you guys, the system is not, I always say the system's not all put together yet, because the truth of the matter is the minute you lose your Boston equity applicant, your application's done. It's dead in the water.
And
you have to start over.
You have to start over.
You have to start over. You're done.
Shakia, you bring up a really good point, because equity is not just for the business owners.
Right.
And one of the places that we are looking to go to as an industry in Boston and in the state is consumption.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about consumption, the biggest and most important piece of that is the consumer.
Absolutely.
Because Boston, particularly Roxbury and half of Dorchester, is one of the most thickly settled, federally subsidized areas, second to New York, but on the eastern block, on the eastern side of this country. So they, just so you know, if you live in federally subsidized housing, which most of us live next door to federally subsidized housing, or the unit or in it, or the lady next door is, and you paying market. That's another podcast, housing in Massachusetts. But you can't consume in your home, in the hallway, in the building, outside of the building.
Legally.
Can't be outside.
Or next door, because if next door is 1-2, you can't be outside. You can't smoke in the park. And that's part of that funnels into the nuance of the stigma issue,
Yep.
right? Because all the old ladies are mad because they walk down the street to go to the park and there's somebody in the park smoking. So that part, that we didn't get that part right either.
Mm-mm.
And if I can
Not
quickly
yet.
add, you also can't, there are a lot of businesses, Massachusetts, this is Boston.
Mhm.
They have a lot of buildings.
Yes.
I don't
Mhm.
care where, I don't care if it's subsidized or not, that you can't smoke
You
in.
can't smoke
Yeah.
in. They're in my other life, in the other world that I live in. I know you I put people out because they
Mhm.
smoking in the building.
There's two things I think about that. One, we mentioned New York a few times, and in that area, I think they got it right.
Everybody
They
can
have a
Woo!
law
Yes.
where
got it
you
right.
could
They
just
got it
smoke.
right.
You could just smoke on the street, just like you could do cigarettes, just like you could do
Correct.
anywhere publicly, next to the police, wherever you want to
In their
go.
face. I saw that. That was crazy.
Right? And then we still have that federal illegality of in housing. And so my issue with social consumption, we don't have social consumption licenses yet,
Mhm.
which is both a great and a bad thing because they've been in our regulations since 2017. They
Mhm.
haven't come to fruition, but we do have 14 other license types that the CCC has been focusing on.
Mhm.
As they come on board, those license types, they will be specific to equity businesses, but I think that we need to have a lens that doesn't focus on social consumption as a business.
Yes.
We need to be somewhere where we can go
Access.
freely to
Mhm.
just smoke. I shouldn't have to go somewhere.
Exactly. It's just
I
smoking or
shouldn't have
not.
to buy a license.
Like drinking.
Mhm.
Exactly. I
Right.
shouldn't have to pay somewhere, just like they're standing up safe consumption sites. Not safe consumption sites, safe injection sites.
Mhm.
That's not a business that they're
Mhm.
opening. That's a public health campaign.
Correct.
This is medicine.
Mhm.
People should be able to go to a medical dispensary and try something out inside.
Mhm.
I just recently, and I know some CCC members here have also visited, but I just came back from Oakland. And their public
Ooh.
consumption in San Francisco and in Oakland taught me a lot of stuff because we don't have it yet. And really, what a social consumption site is, outside of the business aspect of it, is what do you call those things?
Tiny house.
No,
Or try before you buy.
no, yes, but what do you call those? A focus group.
Mhm.
Yes.
A focus group. So you go in, you can get whatever you want, buy whatever you want, taste it, try
wine
it, smoke
tasting.
it right there.
Yeah.
And now that business knows what brands to bring in, what brands to take out. It's like a symbiotic relationship
Mhm.
for the consumer, the branding, and the product manufacturer, the business itself. But we also just have to look at options that don't tie everything that we're doing in terms of public consumption to
A
capitalism.
business. Yes.
Correct.
It's
Yes.
treating it like alcohol.
Yes.
I mean, I can buy it, take it home. I can certainly have a wine tasting where
Yep.
you're coming in,
Mhm.
and then you may buy after. You may, once you're there, you pay to get in the door or whatever.
Social consumption is and
But
Well,
like to be-
consumption doesn't only mean
Whew.
smoking, y'all.
It doesn't.
Correct.
Yes.
like
There you
and that's
go.
where I
I'm
was
sorry.
going.
I was like, I'm waiting
this
for them to
half
get
of
to
my
me.
brain was like
I'm like,
beverage, and this half of my brain
I
was
know.
like edible, and this one was
Mhm.
cookie.
like gourmet meal,
Yeah.
massage.
But I like to be-
yes, it's massage,
aromatherapy.
I like to
aromatherapy.
be a devil's advocate when we talk about communities, okay? And when we want to bring this into a community,
Yes.
how do you get the community? And this, I think, is where our real work is.
Yes.
Mhm.
As we're
Stigma.
working, is how do you get a community to not be afraid of that?
Who?
Yep.
Teach
And
them.
but to me, that's a solution. And who's teaching us?
Mhm.
You said saying
Mhm.
what to teach them. These are things that,
And
like, what are we doing to get rid of the stigma?
particularly the communities that we're supposed to be doing this repair in, they don't even know what the CCC is.
Right.
They don't know that it's legal. They don't know the difference between, and I'm really talking about elders, because those are the people that call me. Those are the people that call me at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. I heard I could get some of that stuff you sell and put it on my knee. That's what I get. No, I'm serious. That's what I get.
They can.
And that leads to usually a 2.5 hour conversation.
Yeah.
Well, can you come to my church and tell the deacon that? Because I don't want to get thrown out of church, but that stuff worked better than the thing the doctor's giving me on my knee. And so you have whole communities that we're supposed to be fixing the harm with that don't even fundamentally understand what cannabis is, why their grandson went to jail, that their grandson's record could get expunged, that he could get a job in the industry, what they really sell in that dispensary on the corner. No one is selling heroin or other what do you call those things, opiates. Okay, that's not happening there. Everyone has to get a license. Everyone is vetted. I have to walk around with a card every time I go into a dispensary to work there. All of those things. They have no idea what is. It's like there's this little special little room that some of us get to go in every now and then. We have our little private parties and all these events for us, but no one is engaging with the actual community that we're supposed to be helping. Outside from getting some records expunged, we are doing that, but the folks in the community have no idea what it is that we do
and have a real interest.
And they're still scared. They still think.
I would say some of them are engaged. Like if you're really outside in your community, you're having these conversations. Because I literally had this conversation last month with Vilma. Shout out to you. I don't know if you're watching, but we were talking about she wants to talk to the neighborhood council, talk to them, teach them about the plant, and it really is on us. Like it starts locally. I always tell my kids it starts here. This is where we practice. This is where we show up every day.
Absolutely.
And then you bring it outside. So really we have to start in our communities being the anchors of education.
Correct.
And really, if you're an educator, if you like to teach and you love the plant, this is your calling.
Yes.
Let the universe be telling you right now.
And that's what we call an ancillary business.
Thank you.
But we also need the government to support those ancillary businesses. We need the government to find people who teach and say, hey, here's I don't really want the government to create the curriculum because we're not doing that. We already can't have books in the library. But we need to find the herbal people like myself and the teachers and create these ancillary, because the ancillary business is what's going to save cannabis. That's what's going to save the industry. It's not the dispensary on the corner. It's not the guy who's growing the weed. It is going to be the support businesses that save cannabis. And I love to say it's going to be the women that save the cannabis.
So if I can add one thing to this.
Dare I
say this as the oldest woman in this room as I look around. There are so many things that cannabis would really be useful for.
Correct.
If you could use it. Menopause. I had breast cancer 20 years ago and was too afraid, lived in Georgia, was too afraid through chemo and radiation to use it. And I wouldn't use it. I only look back now and say, if I had only known enough about it, the healing effects, the things that it makes you do is eat. What you need to do to keep strong through your 6 months of chemo is to eat and those sorts of things. And I think this is part of the education. So I just want to say this, senior citizens, go to it like a senior citizen where they gather, they have them across the city and that sort of thing. And folks are really interested. We just don't know. How do you get it?
How do you,
some guy on the street that
we're missing the mark.
We are missing the mark.
That's our community.
I think that the issue too, honestly, with public awareness is that it starts and then it dwindles away. And it's like you put out a public awareness campaign, you put out a talk to your children. I know CCC did a bunch of them, right? They were on commercials and TVs across,
but they have to be to the level of the breaking of the egg in the pot.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Because y'all remember the PSA. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? Right. They have to be to that level. If you're gonna undo it, you got to undo it the same way you did it. Right. We are of that not you. Your generation got it way worse than we did. I mean, they went to the movies and got a PSA about drugs.
And smoking too.
And all of it. Okay, you know what I mean?
Smoking too.
Before the movie started, it was, you will die. It will be raped. You will be kidnapped. Oh, the devil's lettuce. But we are of a specific generation with Degrassi and those types of commercials. And then we went to school and we had
Dare
the Dare
program.
program. I mean, those Reagans really jacked us up. Okay, so the destigmatization needs to be at a national level like that. And I'm getting the 10-minute warning here.
In the feds.
Let
Okay,
me add real
okay.
quickly. The bigger issue, while I talked about cancer, is menopause.
Yeah.
Hot flashes. As a matter of fact, when I had cancer, I was medically induced menopause. So it was like the next
Wow.
day. Now you have hot flashes. Have a great life.
Right.
But we're glad you beat it.
But no. But what I'm saying is the things that when you have to relax. So I started doing yoga. I started doing, if you get agitated, you go into a hot flash, those sorts of things. These are things that are helpful where you want to take a gummy. You can't sleep at night. You don't sleep for the whole night. I know most of you have seen mothers and your mothers and grandmothers not being able to sleep at night and they're walking around. This is why. And then you wake up, you're sweating and all this sort of thing. The idea of what cannabis, it's not just something there. It can help you.
Right.
This can help you manage who you are in your day. So I just want to add that. And we don't talk about it in that very positive light. That it could make you feel so much better.
We have bros on surfboards selling cannabis to other men right now. And then they get cute and they give us, women's history gummies and we get pride gummies and we get, every now and then. But no one is fundamentally thinking about the needs of people with regard to cannabis outside of bros getting high, period. That is the paradigm that we are sitting in.
That's why we exist. That's why Zev exists. Because we needed stuff for us. Like I started consuming because I had postpartum depression. It was making me better. It was a healing tool. And then I had to hide it because I was a nurse. It was crazy. So you live in this matrix of like acceptance and balance when we can literally just marry them by teaching people what it can do for them.
Exactly.
And like I never thought I could run a half marathon. I did last year because I had topicals that helped me get through and I had medicine that helped me pay attention to my body when I run. Like we're not talking about these things. And it's like this is why Leslie and I are always talking about these things.
Plant Lady podcast.
It's the shift from
Plant Lady podcast.
Cannabis to public health.
Yes.
But
that's a part of your
we did start there, right? Every jurisdiction started with a medical program, even those that are not recreationally legal. And really there's really no difference between smoking recreationally and smoking medicinally, except that you've identified that you're smoking them for this particular reason.
It's a tax discount and dosage. That's all that it is. Everyone,
10 grams instead of 5.
We're all patients.
Everyone should be able to get cannabis the same way.
Right.
Whether they grow it in their house or they go to a store and they purchase it. We've allowed the government to create the CBD standard of 0.3, right? Which means if you grow hot hemp, which is hemp over 0.3, you had to destroy it until recently. And I love how the state is talking to the state about how to make that make sense for CBD producers. Not CBD is a topic that we do not discuss in cannabis, which
or hemp.
We don't. But we have to learn to do more integration here.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing, some of the fixes is we need to start walking down the public health road.
Exactly.
We need to start walking down the educating our community road. We need to focus on the ladies because I just want y'all to know that the cosmetic industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it does not matter if women are broke or not. They will buy cream,
a lipstick.
They will buy something to adorn themselves with. Now, I know, bros, y'all are just like, here she goes again. But I mean, all that's going to happen is one of these women in the room is going to just kick you out of the room because they fundamentally understand. One of us will get some money from somewhere. We will, because that's what we do. We find it. Lisa, you gonna find it?
I'll find it.
Okay, but that's what we do. It's there's just a whole demographic as the demo. There's a whole demo that no one is paying attention to, and it is us. It is us. It is all of our aches and pains. I don't give me another blue dream to help me get my mind together. Like I'm tired of that nuanced story. Like grow some weed with women in mind and think about how we could have a better life with it. We're just thinking all everybody's thinking about is getting high. That's it. No, there's so many other
Other
places
things.
and spaces that we could go into.
Mhm.
So just to pull everything together and wrap it up. I know, because we could. I mean, we'll probably just stay here. And, somebody make us some infused mimosas, and we'll be all right. But I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to kind of, give that 2 minutes of like what they would like to see and how the industry can fix itself. Because we sure did do a lot of griping, but I like to leave on a positive note here, even though I played devil's advocate today. Shakia,
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think that city can do to affect change within the cannabis space in Massachusetts?
I think a lot of the things that we have been doing, because the city is small, but I again will just reiterate that one, equity is not a program, and so the city, meaning myself, needs to reimagine what equity looks like, how we're tracking it, what is the success of equity, not for us in the city, so we can tout we have 50% equity businesses open, but what does that look like above and beyond licensing? Who does that impact? Where do we meet them where they are? How do we meet them where they are? And who is at the table, right? Right now, I sit on a team of one. When I first got into the state, I sat on a team of one for several years before I got another person. And so the city is smaller, it's a lot less to deal with, so that makes sense. But yeah, just really being more intentional about, like you said, those drop in a bucket money figures. Like we do give out grants up to $50,000. We will increase that this year because we have to outsource the grant. It's a city law that we can't give above and beyond that. So it's really just how do we navigate around the bureaucratic process to really make this industry thrive above and beyond certain limitations that the state may impose, right? Like how do we broaden it? And even in our equity programming, that initially started with how do we broaden any limitations that the state's program may have.
So augment.
Yes.
What is already there? How can we put some systems around that to further support our citizens?
Definitely.
All right, well, I'm watching, girl.
Okay.
And if you want to have a team of 2 or more,
Okay.
how we doing, Drew?
Excellent. Always.
Tell me what you would like to see happen, especially from your vantage point, because I know you got ancillary people driving you crazy.
They always drive me
These
crazy.
real estate people, I
They
don't know.
always drive me crazy. I'd like to see us have more of these conversations.
Yeah.
I'd like to see us talk about how we introduce the plant to our elders. I'd like to see, the story out there. I'll tell the story for the last time, maybe not. But I had to explain to my mom that I was leaving nursing to go sell weed. Pastor, and it's like that was the hardest if you even understand the cultural challenge right there, like you understood that I had to it took a lot of education.
My daddy's been in law enforcement my
Girl,
entire
and my
life.
brother's
That
And it wouldn't
conversation.
matter.
Oh my God.
It didn't
Like,
matter
what
which
are you
family
doing?
you were telling the
Right.
story
It's
to.
like,
Oh.
if we have these conversations,
I
and we
I
start
just
to
didn't even have
inform.
it. I was just like, I'm not gonna tell him. He's
Oh,
gonna
no,
find out
sis.
on the news.
No.
Drew, I want to add something to your story that we could work on too as a city, and we've tried, but rent control.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't mean the larger context of rent control because that's a political
That's
conversation.
a political conversation.
But I mean the rent tax that is now imposed on cannabis business specifically because it's a cannabis business.
Because it's a cannabis
and businesses sitting on rental properties for 2, 3 years as they have to go through the licensing process and may not ever get through the licensing process.
Because they gotta sit on a property.
And they sitting
for
on the
2
property.
years.
Paying rent is
And
what we
paying
mean by
rent on
sitting on the
properties,
property.
and the properties are barely up to code half the
Right.
time because you can't have a federally backed landlord.
Mhm.
Right.
So and we talk about this a lot, but I feel like a lot of the lessons I learned because I share my story with the city so openly, it helps fix those systems.
Absolutely.
And it
Yes.
really helps redirect the resources to where they need to be. So I don't want the mistakes that happen with our company to happen with others.
Right.
And I want you guys to know exactly how I got. And this is a system that got me got.
Yep.
And can you fix it, please, so it doesn't happen to somebody else? But I think the conversation in general, like I always say, in our community, especially in Mattapan, the reason cannabis in Mattapan are hard is because it's a community led by elders,
Mhm.
and they want to have these conversations. There's a church on every corner.
Corner.
They want to have these conversations. There's a 55+ community across the street from our location. They
Yes.
want to have these
There
conversations.
is.
No one's leading the charge. And me as a business owner, I need to open my business. And I don't have a team of little army people that I can send out to the community to teach them what they need to teach. So we get really creative. We get online. We have canversation events. But how else do you start bridging the gap so that our elders, my mom's been off her night meds since I introduced her to tincture.
Mhm.
And it's like, that is a gift as a nurse, getting my mom off the sleeping pills with a tincture that I know doesn't harm her, or
Mhm.
getting her a topical that's keeping her from having a shoulder surgery.
Mhm.
She's claiming, it's not a medical claim, y'all. She said it, not I. But like being able to produce these things and have the conversation so she's open and she can go to the church and help the other lady with arthritis to put this topical on. I want to see more of that.
I
want
can come to the church.
Come on, girl.
Yeah.
Let's come on.
I'll go with you.
Let us know.
I'll
And
go
then really
with
just
you.
having this conversation in our languages.
Mhm.
Right.
Oh,
That
that
part.
part.
Yes.
That part.
That part. Because saying it to my mother in Haitian Creole, saying it to my neighbors in Spanish, Leslie speaking it in Spanish to our grandmother, we are literally intentionally learning how to speak about cannabis in our languages because we understand the responsibility that we carry. And that's also part of the puzzle. So it's really like, those are the things I want to see. I want to see us gather and talk. Like, bring your mamas.
Mhm.
My friend has a spot. It's called La Sala, Nubian Square. Let's go sit down and talk to the elders right there.
Mhm. Yes.
Let's do it.
Beautiful.
Let's go.
Dwan.
Well, actually, it's building on what the two of you just said. I think streamlining, recognizing where we are now. It's been 5 years.
Yep.
How do we change some of the basic rules? And it's going through the things we're doing at the CCC, City of Boston as well. What things can be streamlined? What things can we do a little bit differently
Mhm.
about licensing, about who's eligible to work, about what
Yep.
the CCC is really looking at and what we're not? To actually have these conversations, to be able to come to you guys and say, I can tell you where this is going wrong because I'm sitting at Castle Leaf or I'm sitting at Air, and I can tell you what these mistakes are. I think also there are a lot of, something you mentioned, one of the best places for you to go to find people who may find time would be a large cannabis company that needs their positive impact plan role
y'all heard that?
to come into your community to talk about, let's talk about cannabis. It would be partnering with a larger company and working together where they're going to come in. If you come now, Shay and I would show up. I'm being very serious about that.
I've seen it. I mean, our first conversation was through Olivia.
Levia, right. We will
Like,
come
you guys
in
are
and
always
talk about
supportive,
it,
yeah.
but it's a way where you're really making impact if you're asking an Air or a large company to come in, that you're talking about products they may have, and you're working together in business. It's a kind of an introduction. It doesn't have to be us over here and you're over there and you're
Right.
acting separately. There are ways that we could do different types of businesses together. Also, I think an opportunity to do businesses and get ideas from the legacy market, folks, because these
Absolutely.
people know how to sell weed.
They do.
They've been doing
They know
it.
how to
That's all they've been
advertise.
doing. That's all they.
No, we can keep acting like they don't, but they aren't out there,
Well,
but they're out there. So
they're
that would be
killing
mine.
us. I mean, that's the market consolidation, right? That's the secret elephant in the room and it's a secret elephant because they're so good at it. They'll be in the room.
They know. They,
They-
won't
and
get
they know what they're
excited.
doing.
Yes, yes.
They can read people. They know who.
But
They
but
know who they going
piggybacking off of what you just said with partnerships, I'd like to say Air is one of the few companies that I do see partnering with smaller businesses and getting in the community and doing that work. So I thank you. But that happens because representation matters, which segues into what I would like to see is just more of us.
Exactly.
I would just like that we are not unicorns. There are a whole bunch of us.
It's great.
I mean, we're all sitting in a room right now, you know, but I would just like to see more of us. I would like to see folks listening to what we have to say, because I'm tired of y'all calling me to come and fix y'all mess after you get in it. You call me, Meaka, how did you like? How did you get here? And it's fundamentally because the structures are going into place first without asking the people who know. Ask the people who know. We probably would not be having the shenanigans at the CCC if there were people at the CCC who understood the communities that they were representing, not just the business owners, but the people who were actually consuming the cannabis. So if there were people who were at the top who fundamentally understood that you can't go to liquor and gambling and say, hey, liquor gamble people, come over here and create the rules for something that nobody fundamentally understood. That's you can't do it that way. You have to talk to the boots on the ground. You need to know what the people's expectations are, right? So in CCC 2.0 world, we need to have people who fundamentally know what cannabis is, not just people who can pass background checks and work at state. I could do that all day. No, we need people who fundamentally know this plant, who fundamentally know what it's like to stand up a business, who know what the roadblocks are, so that we can cut out all of the noise. We can streamline all of the systems. That's what I would like to see. That's my request. And with that, I thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget to check in to the record company, which, by the way, is doing some where my notes go, y'all. Doing some amazing things here.
It's gorgeous.
Yes. This place is amazing. Thank you, Bobby, for having us. Shout out my boo, Bobby Dangero, out there. But the record company has become that pillar of community that we have been talking about here. The place that we want to see. Since 2010, and they've recently launched the Amplify Boston, a high impact $1 million fundraising campaign to create new rehearsal and recording studios to bolster Boston's vital music scene. So shout out the record company, y'all. Our host for today. This space is beautiful. We are well lit. Shout out my crew here. Shout out my hubby Nelly. I don't know where you are, but yes, he's right there. Shout out Danny. Okay. And Miss Lisa Finelli Fallon for giving me the opportunity to have this platform to get all of us in a room and we are looking for sponsorship.
Shout out Black Cannabis, Boston Cannabis Week.
Yes, shout out Boston Cannabis Week. We have Fashion on Fire. We have dispensary tours. We have an amazing festival happening this Saturday. So I'm not going to sit here and tell y'all what's going on the days, because I can't see. But hit up bostoncannabisweek.com, buy your tickets. There's so much to do this week, and I hope to see y'all. Thank you to my amazing studio audience, which I did not get to ask any questions, but y'all had notebooks and pens. You know, they taking notes, okay? These sisters came here with meads and freaking mechanical pencils. They was ready, okay? But shout out everybody, and thank you for joining us, and I hope to see y'all soon. The Plant Lady Podcast, y'all, and we out.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.